Yes, it's time again for us to talk about that ACJL, as the Administration of Criminal Justice Law 2017. The journey is continuous, and we do not ever end until we achieve the main aim, which is to make sure we all have a good understanding of what this law is. Welcome. This is Will of Justice. My name is Ifeanyi Awa. And don't forget, this program comes your way Tuesdays by 3:30, and it is brought to you by the Abia State Administration of Criminal Justice Monitoring Committee, Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, that is PRAWA, with the support of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, OSIWA, and Abia State Justice Reform Team. Now, this week, we continue on a bit of series we have been on for the 2 weeks before last week, and that is on judicial autonomy. And this week, we're looking at that judicial autonomy, the gateway to seamless implementation of the Section 2 of the ACJL 2017. And as I always do every week, I have a guest who's going to be helping us understand this part of the ACJL and also how it affects the judicial autonomy. And I'm speaking of Barrister Mordecai Ihejirika, who is here with me. Welcome very much to our studios.
Thank you for having me, my brother.
All right, we're going to be jumping into our conversation in a bit. Just stay tuned. This is still Will of Justice. Alright, welcome back. Will of Justice is back on your radio. My name is Ifeanyi Awa, and just like I said earlier, I have Barrister Mordecai Ihejirika. And we're going to be looking at judicial autonomy as a gateway to seamless implementation of the Section 2 of the ACJL 2017. But before we jump into this section of the ACJL, now, we've talked about judicial autonomy for about 2 weeks now, and someone might say, no, it's really that important. Why are we still on judicial autonomy? How important is it? Why are we still coming back to this?
Okay, the foundations of our constitution actually lie on the separation of powers,
okay,
between the different arms of government. The idea of separation of powers is so that none of the arms of government becomes a lord unto themselves. There is what is called balance of power. Your excesses as an arm of government is checked by the other arm of government. So the issue of judicial autonomy becomes very important to our society because we have chosen to be a democracy, and we have chosen to live by a constitution. If you look at the very preambles of our constitution, it says that we the people have chosen to make a particular law for ourselves. So if we ignore the issue of judicial autonomy, which is a fulcrum, a foundational part of our constitution, then as a society we are moving in the direction of tyranny.
Now, right now the country is going through a little bit of dilemma in terms of this issue because the JOSN has been on strike for over a month now due to this particular issue on autonomy. It's really affecting the nation, but we're going to come to that part later on during the show. But let's look at Section 2 of the ACJL, and I'd love to read this so we can have a better understanding of this. Now, Section 2, subsection 1 says, the purpose of the law, of this law, is to ensure that the system of administration of criminal justice in the state promotes efficient management of criminal justice institutions, speedy dispensation of justice, protection of the society from crime, and protection of the rights and interests of the suspect, the defendant, and the victim. Now, this is the first part. We're going to just hold on the first part before we go to the second part. Now, this is basically, it spells out the aim of the ACJL. Now, how does judicial autonomy help to achieve this aim?
You can't manage the judiciary effectively if there is no autonomy. You know, they say the man who holds the money is the one who determines. They said the piper is the one who determines the tune.
Yeah.
So if as an organization or if as an arm of government you do not have financial autonomy, it means whoever has your financial autonomy determines the tune of what you are going to be dancing as an arm of government. So when we talk about efficient management of judgment or efficient dispensation of justice, the judiciary cannot carry out their work effectively if they have to wait for their money to come. That means the speedy dispensation of justice is not going to be able to be done. The judiciary has to wait. For instance, in different states. Let me not particularize any particular state because the present struggle, like
it's in all states.
Yes, in all the states. Like JUSON is a federal body. It's more like a pressure group.
Okay.
If you ask me. So in different states, you have situations where you have magistrate courts, you have customary courts that are dilapidated. You have magistrates who have to sit in thorns in a particular court. It's like a shift. Now, a magistrate, instead of working from, let's say, 8, let's say 9 when they have to sit till whenever they are done for the day, they have to rise earlier than they ought to because another magistrate has to use the same hall. Now, when you have such a situation, cases that should last for months end up lasting for years. And at the end of the day, you see, justice is not served. They said justice delayed is justice denied. If you keep someone in prison, let's say for 10 years, or let's say for 5 years, I have cases, and I'm a relatively young lawyer. I have cases that have lasted for 5 years, and let's assume the person is in jail, and at the end of the day, you find that he's not guilty. Now you see, his justice has been denied. And that means justice has been denied him. And most times it's because of these logistical problems that result from the judiciary not having what they need. Now, if the judiciary has what it needs, they can run their affairs better or more efficiently. So the ACJL, why I am even focusing on the ACJL, I'm not even talking about civil cases because the ACJL deals specially and specifically with criminal cases.
Okay.
So we are looking at, for instance, JUSON is on strike. Criminals or perceived criminal suspects, people who are incarcerated, their cases are stalled. I have cases. I have a particular case where someone is being accused of murder and stuff has been sorted out, but yet we need the courts in order to get him out, and we can't do that because the courts are on strike. And why are the courts on strike? Because there's what will I call it now? There's a protest by the JUSON asking for financial autonomy. If they had that autonomy, we would probably not be on strike.
Okay. Now, before we continue on that line, you're talking about speedy disposition of justice, which is what the ACJL seeks to achieve. And the federal government, as it is right now, and also the state government, have not given the judiciary their autonomy yet. Wouldn't want, some persons might say, you know what, maybe the judiciary can still, have some kind of agreement with the government, and they can still be in charge of the finances of the judiciary, but still, because we know the government has the interest of the legal situation at heart, and they will also want speedy dispensation of justice. So can the government still pay the bills and still make sure that we have speedy dispensation of justice?
Well, it might be too late in the day to argue in that direction. You need to be informed that several judgments have been given. At least 2 judgments have been given on this issue of financial autonomy, which ordinarily I don't think should really be a force because it's a constitutional provision. So it's now gone way past the idea of the government trying to have interest and heart and all that. It's now become an issue of executing existing judgments. Judgments have been given. The necessary arguments have been made. Does the states have power to hold the funds? Who has power to? All those arguments have been made in the courts, and courts have given judgments. So it's now an issue of execution. And the JUSON, I think, though I'm not a member of the JUSON, but I think the JUSON is just standing on those existing judgments and saying, let these judgments be implemented. I just think that's the position of the JUSON.
Now, the ACJL looks at the interest of not just the victim, which everybody seems to look at that part. No, you've been wrong. That's the interest there. But it also looks at the interest of the suspect and the defendant. Is this particular issue of autonomy affecting it, especially when it comes to that of the defendant and the suspect?
One of the things about justice is not a one-way traffic. Justice is said to be a three-way traffic. First, the justice for the man who is the suspect, who is also called the defendant. The justice for the victim or the alleged victim. And then there's the justice for the society. If someone in the society looks at the case as it is, would they say it is just? In a situation where now the judiciary not being autonomous places that bias, that suspicion of impartiality, of partiality against the judiciary,
which is something we have right now.
Yes, because if you look at the fact that the police establishments, of course, they are doing their job, but they form part of the executive. Now, if the executive is prosecuting a particular person, a defendant, before a particular court, and the salary of the judge who is to sit is determined by the executive. Looking at it from a neutral point of view, you would say, once again, he who is playing the piper determines the tune.
So I might argue in that point. So that, but we've seen cases where the judge rules against the government. So what are we talking about?
Well, that's difficult. If we begin to argue in that direction, you would find out that even when the rule at the end of the day, it's still the same police or something that has to execute, that has to be part of the execution.
Very true.
So the essence of the Constitution preempted all these issues. The Constitution foresaw that there will be issues like this, and that's why that issue of autonomy comes in. Let each arm be autonomous financially. Let everybody be responsible for their funding and all that, so that they can work more efficiently.
All right, if you're just tuning in, this is Wheel of Justice. I'm speaking with Barrister Mordecai Ihejirika, and we're looking at the judicial autonomy as the gateway to seamless implementation of Section 2 of the ACJL 2017, and we've gone through a first part of the Section 2, which talks about the aim of the ACJL, what it aims to achieve, and which is what people actually have been clamoring for in terms of the judiciary. Now, the other part of this Section 2 states that the courts, law enforcement agencies, and other authorities or persons involved in criminal justice administration shall ensure compliance with the provisions of this law for the realization of its purpose. Do you want to explain that, and also how judicial autonomy has a role to play in this?
It means that this law, the ACJL, has to be. It's not just okay to make a law. Of course, it's not the judiciary that makes a law. The legislature do. But whenever there is a law, there must be a body responsible for executing, prosecuting the law, or enforcing the law. So this law puts that in the purview of both the courts, the law enforcement agencies, and other persons. So what that subsection 2 of Section 2 is saying is that the courts have to make sure that there is speedy dispensation of justice. And I think when it now begins to talk about other authorities or persons involved in the criminal justice administration, that's where bodies like the JUSON come in. These guys are staffs of the judiciary, and they are saying, we think that for us to do our work better, we think that for the judges to do their work better, they need to have financial autonomy. So they are giving effect to subsection 2 of Section 2. So
the autonomy becomes like a situation that can help, a clause that can also help achieve this.
Yes. Autonomy will definitely help to achieve. You see, we've had different laws in terms of criminal administration. The ACJL that came in 2017 sought to cure the ills or the inadequacies of the previous laws. Now, if we cannot do something like Section 2, which talks about speedy dispensation of justice, not just justice, but speedy dispensation of justice, then there was no use having the ACJL in the first place.
So you're saying the issue of autonomy is actually dragging the ACJL back?
Yes, the absence of autonomy is dragging the ACJL back.
Wow, that becomes an issue. That becomes an issue when you look at it. Okay, now still on this issue of the ongoing issue with JUSON and the government of the various states in the country. At the moment, we've seen various persons in jail right now who cannot leave jail because of this strike, and it keeps increasing the number of persons behind bars. Now, someone would say, you know what, maybe the person actually did this stuff, or let the person be there. What is the case? How can you how can you use the ACJL to go against this person or to correct this particular idea?
Now, thank you for raising that issue. You can see that everybody is affected by this strike. Let me not talk about the lawyers who are private legal practitioners. Let's talk about the prisons, for instance. The prisons have people who are in prison and they cannot come out. Already our prisons are excessively stocked with inmates. Yeah. And ordinarily, if the courts were on, they would have some of these inmates leaving by virtue of being freed.
Which is actually part of the aim of the ACJL.
Yes, which is part of the aim of the ACJL. Now, you have people who are arrested by the police, and ordinarily, the police do not have facilities for keeping so many people. The idea is the police arrest, they are taken to court, they are either granted bail or sent to the prisons. Now, a cell in the police station that is probably supposed to just take 50 people, what do they do if they have 200 people? You see how the the strike is affecting the administration of criminal justice. So in effect, the absence of judicial autonomy definitely affects the speedy dispensation of justice. If the judiciary is not free to do their job, they can't do it well.
So much as it is, it's not just a concern of the judiciary, it's a concern for Nigerians.
Yes, every Nigerian should be very concerned. Every Nigerian needs to speak up. It's not supposed to be a big deal. It's supposed to be very, very simple. The constitution is very clear. The judiciary is independent of the executive. The executive is independent of the legislature. But somehow there are checks and balances between the three arms of government.
Now, still moving further. Earlier we talked about the fact that there seems to be this lack of trust on the Nigerian judiciary at the moment. And it's been there for years. People do not, especially when it comes to cases where the government is against the government versus a private individual, civilian, or maybe somebody says the case of the highest bidder in this situation. And I also know that the judiciary has been working to make things clearer and to clear their name in this part. And how does this actually help? Also, how does this actually, try to help paint the judiciary black?
Well, if we release the judiciary from whatever shackles or dependence that they are presently plagued with, then we can hold them accountable for certain things. We've had cases over and over again where, just like you said, the perception. If a man is paying, is just like bringing a man before his accusers and asking his accusers to preside over him. One of the twin pillars of justice is that Latin maxim that a man cannot be a judge in his own case. A situation where the executive is paying or is responsible for the well-being, the financial well-being and financial running of the judiciary, it places a picture that if you have a case against the executive, you are actually appearing before the man that you are supposed to be appearing against. So for perception's sake and for reality's sake, I don't want to go into the Nigerian factor. Which every Nigerian is aware of. If you have a case against whether it's a state government or any form of executive government, you find yourself in doubt. Is the judiciary going to give you the justice you deserve? Because you know that somehow the judiciary is beholden to the executive. It's this perception that I think the present strike seeks to cure.
You did say that when autonomy is given, that Nigerians can actually hold the judiciary responsible.
Yes.
For things. Now, does that mean that at the moment we can't completely hold the judiciary responsible?
That's what I chose to call the Nigerian factor. Once again, I've said this and I'm saying it for the third time. The man who plays the pipe dictates the tune. If someone is it's just like making the judiciary a servant or an employee of the executive. It's just like making the executive a boss to the judiciary. And how do you expect them to be autonomous? How do you expect them to be independent? The idea of a judiciary is that it's an impartial judge. So if the judiciary is tending or leaning towards another arm of government, then the partiality comes into play.
When we talk about autonomy, are we just focusing on financial autonomy? Is there any other angle to this?
Well, the Bible would say money answereth all things. So once you give financial autonomy, several other autonomies will spring up from there.
What of appointments?
Well, the issue of appointments, once again, is also determined by certain statutory provisions, including constitutional provisions. But once again, you see, there are certain rights, certain assertions the judiciary ought to make. You see them sometimes take a step backward because they don't want to affect the other arms of government, especially the executive. And that's why I said the money answers everything. Once financial autonomy is given, there are several other autonomies that the judiciary will not need to ask for. Those autonomies will naturally spring up.
I've continually asked this question because we're almost out of time. For every guest who's been here, I've always asked this question. Will the autonomy of the judiciary affect the government negatively?
It won't affect the government negatively.
So why do we have this delay?
Well, you will have to ask the executives.
Because that's why I always ask this question. Is there any way where autonomy happens and the government gets to suffer from this?
No, there's no way. It's very simple. It's about independence. It's about it's about specialization, allowing the judiciary do their thing their own way as specified. Now, there are already laws of how the judiciary would go about running their affairs. All they are saying, I feel the simple picture financial autonomy is creating is the judiciary saying, let us do our job the way we ought to do it. It's not supposed to cause any problem.
No. And I was speaking with Barrister Mordecai Hejirika, and we're looking at the judicial autonomy as the gateway to seamless implementation of Section 2 of the ACJL 2017. And don't forget, this is brought to you by the Abia State Administration of Criminal Justice Monitoring Committee, Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action Power, with the support of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, OSIWA, and Abia State Justice Reform Team. If this issue continues, we're going to have lingering cases in court. That's what it means at the moment. Nigerians continue to suffer with it. So, as I know you're not a member of JOSON, but as a Nigerian, as a lawyer who is also affected by this, what will be your plea to the government?
Well, I'll plead with the government to work out things with JOSON. The cry of JOSON, even though I know there are arguments, people are wondering if JOSON is the right person to be speaking out. But they say evil thrives when good men keep quiet. I plead with the government to work out things with not just JOSON, with the judiciary, come up with a roadmap forward. We must make progress from where we are now. Where we are now, we can't stay there. More developed climes have moved on. More developed climes have moved forward. We've had other countries who have, you could see the clear independence of the judiciary. You can see them take their stand on issues without really minding whose ox is God. You know, recently we remember the United States of America and the fact that the Chief Justice of that nation was asked to preside over the impeachment trials of Donald J. Trump after he just left office. And the man, can you imagine a Chief Justice saying, "No, I won't"? Why? Because he's independent. He's not beholden to the legislators. He's not beholden to the new president. Because his arm of government is independent, he has the boldness to take a stand for that arm of government. But if it's a situation where he's beholden, probably he won't get a salary, or the next thing he would be removed or something. So when the judiciary is independent, they are bold enough to even fault both the executive or the judiciary where they think they are wrong.
Anyways, we continue to hope for the best out of the situation. I hope that things can get better. Because I believe that at the end of the day, everybody gets to gain from this.
Yes.
Everybody gets to gain from this. Thank you very much, Barrister Mordecai Hejirika, who has been speaking on the judicial autonomy as a gateway to seamless implementation of the Section 2 of the ACJL 2017. And you know that the ACJL was brought in to make sure that this speedy dispensation of justice and also fights for the interests of the suspect, the defendant, and also the victim. And if you've been following this program for the past months that it's been on, you discover that everybody is represented in the ACJL. And what this means is, if justice is not served to one person, it means it's not served to all at the end of the day. And what I've gained from everything that Barrister Mordecai has said is, if we don't achieve this judicial autonomy, the ACJL would be dragged back.
Yes, it will drag.
It will affect the effectiveness of the law.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Don't forget that the Wheel of Justice comes your way Tuesdays 3:30. It is brought to you by the Abia State Administration of Criminal Justice Monitoring Committee and Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action Power, with the support of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, OSIWA, and Abia State Justice Reform Team. Once again, I want to thank Barrister Mordecai Hejirika for coming through. It has been nice. It's nice really having you here.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully you can come back once again.
I wouldn't mind.
Anyways, my name remains Ifeanyi. Stay tuned. There's more to come right here. A good day to you.